Security Program. Now this slide shows you the program of the next about 1 hour. I will begin with briefly explaining you the setup of the webinar. I will then say a few words on the security program in Horizon 2020. I'm doing this on behalf of our colleague Regina Schneider, who is not available today. Then Julian Randall will explain the energy and transport program in Horizon 2020, followed by our colleague Marion Tobler, who will speak about the environment program. Patrick Fuhrer, finally, will talk about CleanTech-related ICT topics in Horizon 2020. We will close this session with answering some of your questions. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. Furthermore, you will receive a follow-up mail with the link to the video as well as the presentations. Now this is how your webinar screen looks like. In the big window on the left-hand side, you have the actual slide, the presentation. In the upper right-hand side corner, you see a picture of the current speaker, and below that is a chat window for your questions. You can pose questions throughout the talks, and we will pick a few to answer at the end of the talks. Most of you will already be well familiar with the structure of Horizon 2020 by now, and its composition in the 3 pillars: excellent science, competitive industries, and tackling societal challenges. Most of the programs we tackle today are located in the tackling societal challenges pillar. There is some topics of the ICT program and also of environment that are located in the competitive industries pillars. Also, the security program is one of the societal challenges. With this introduction, I will now start with having a few words on the security program in Horizon 2020. As I've already mentioned, Regina Schneider is the Swiss national contact person for security, and I'm speaking on behalf of her today. The security program is the last of the societal challenges, as we've just heard. Its main objective is to fund research to help protecting the freedom and foster the security in Europe. This is mainly done through funding technology development and also research into societal implications. Only civil applications can be funded. In short, thus, the security program is dealing with anti-terrorism and anti-organized crime, and is also having the objective of strengthening the European security industry. Now, who should get involved in this program? I just want to stress here that in the security program, it's particularly crucial that end users are getting involved right at the proposal stage. And end users for security applications could, for example, be the blue light forces, such as police, fire brigades, etc. The program is divided into 5 main areas of activity, namely fighting crime and terrorism, strengthening security through border management, providing cybersecurity, and this includes protection of critical infrastructure, increasing Europe's resilience to crises and disasters, and finally ensuring privacy and freedom in the internet and enhancing the societal dimension of security. We don't have a lot of details, unfortunately, at this moment on the first call in 2014. The budget is probably around 2% of the whole Horizon 2020 budget allocated. We expect to have more concrete information on the first call in autumn, and we will pass it on through our established channels. It seems to be clear, however, that there will be a focus in the first work programs on disaster resilience as well as digital security. On my last slide, I provide you with the contact details of our expert in case you have further questions. With that, I pass on the microphone to my colleague Julian Randall.
Great, thank you. So this presentation is covering energy and transport in H 2020, and as we've already seen, there's 3 pillars to Horizon 2020, and energy and transport are both in the same pillar. What you can also see from this slide is that there's a total of 70 billion euro And what I can tell you from at the moment, there will be approximately 6 billion euro for both energy and for transport. So 6 billion each, as far as we know, approximately. That's obviously more information will come. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is go into some of the details of what you can find under energy and transport. I've got a caveat here. It's clear that not all energy aspects are going to be covered in these main slides. There are other you find energy in other parts, just like you find transport in other parts of the Horizon 2020. But this is where the main part of the budget is. So under energy, there are this you can see on the slide the main areas, and the first one is reducing energy consumption and carbon footprint through smart and sustainable usage. That's three aspects to that. The first one is really to do with innovation. It's bringing to mass market the technological services for smart and efficient energy use. But there's also renewable heating and cooling systems and the fostering of the smart cities and communities. Then the next area is low cost, low carbon electricity supply. I think the way you can view this is it's most of the renewable energies. So under low cost, low carbon electricity supply, we have development of wind energy. So the reduction by 20% in cost of electrical production by onshore and offshore wind, developing solar energy systems, CO2 capture and transport and storage, and further renewable energies, so geothermal, hydro, marine, and renewable energies. The third area is alternative fuels and mobile energy sources, and this one is looking at further renewable energies such as bioenergy, but also fuel cell and hydrogen and other alternatives. And the fourth one is the single smart European electricity grid, and this one is looking at, as you would expect, bidirectional digital communication, energy storage, and the planning and regulation necessary for the European grid. The remaining three new knowledge and technologies, relatively broad, robust decision making and public engagement. That's the link to the EU policy and to consumer behavior. And lastly, market uptake of energy innovation empowering markets and consumers. I think that's relatively self-explanatory. So that gives you the first overview on energy. Now I'm going to move on to the overview of transport. What we have here is we have some very clear aims under transport. By 2030, the aim is to halve conventionally fueled cars in cities and achieve virtually CO2-free logistics, city logistics. And by 2050, the goal is to have 40% less carbon in fuels for aviation and to reduce by 40% CO2 emissions from maritime fuels. So now going into the details of what you'll find under transport, you have four areas: resource-efficient transport that respects the environment, better mobility, less congestion, more safety and security, global leadership for the European transport industry, and socio-economic research. What I can tell you about the resource-efficient transport that respects the environment, the first area, is that it's really looking at quieter and cleaner aircraft, vehicles, and vessels. It'll also look at smart equipment, infrastructure, and services. And there'll also be a focus on transport and mobility in urban areas. For the second area, better mobility, less congestion, excuse me, we'll cover intelligent transport applications, new concepts of freight transport and logistics, for example, paperless freight, and reducing accident rates and fatal casualties. The global leadership for the European transport industry is very important because 13 million people, or 6% of European GDP, relies on it. And the goal is to develop next generation transport means, onboard smart control systems, advanced products and processes, and new transport concepts. And finally, as with energy, there's an area which is supporting policy, the socio-economic research and forward-looking activities, and these are focusing on the user and also on social equalities in access to mobility. So that gives you a fast overview on the two thematics, on the energy and transport. And I'm going to take a little bit of time now just to look at some of the other things. The overview on transport. This slide gives you a sense for how things will be similar to FP7. What I can tell already is that the four main modes, road, rail, maritime and air, will remain. And you can see how some of you can see in the following two columns, the Aeronets, the EU tech platforms, those are expected to continue into Horizon 2020. And you can also see on the last column the name that it was called under FP7. So I think that's one of the main messages of this slide. And it's also to say that it's not complete. There are, for example, the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking is not covered. Further platforms are not covered, but for the purposes of this slide, it's sufficient just to have to say there will be a lot of continuation from FP7. So lastly, it's clear that was a very fast overview. There was not much I haven't seen any, and I'm available now during the next until 3 for questions. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate. And obviously, if you have questions after the webinar, here are my details, my email and phone number. So don't hesitate to contact me also afterwards. Now it's time to pass the mic to Marion Tobler. She's going to be presenting environment. And so thank you for listening.
Hello, everybody. Most of you know me as the NCP Environment or NMP. And I'm going to show you where you can find, related to these areas, CleanTech topics in the next framework program. I'm just trying to find the next slide. Okay, here it is. You find the familiar structure as shown by my colleagues before, and I will focus in this area on especially the area climates and resources, which you see in the Better Society pillar. But then I will also say a few words about the topics that are in the competitive industries. Now let us go to the societal challenge in environment. I'm still struggling a little with the next one. Okay, so the challenge is climate action, resource efficiency and raw materials. And I think already from this title you can see that things have changed. You see the first two focus areas in a light blue color, which are the typical environment areas, where you have things like biodiversity loss and others. I would not exclude that there are some clean tech solutions involved if it is about chemical pollution or water shortages. But these are not the main areas where you should look for clean tech solutions. But they are in the next 3 one. So number 3, ensuring the sustainable supply of non-energy and non-agricultural raw material. This is a really new area, because it has been moved from the earlier NMP area to environment. And this is not only about clean tech, but about a whole industry. I will talk a little bit later in detail on what you can find there. The fourth activity is enable the transition towards a green economy through eco-innovation. Now I think most of you know about this, because this has been already an area in FP7. And the nice thing of this area is that we will have some bottom-up topics. So it's the classical clean tech area you might expect within environment. We have a fifth focus area, which is developing comprehensive and sustained global environment observation and information systems. And here we may face some smart IT solutions for satellite imaging and in situ data. Now I will go a little bit more into detail with the clean tech oriented goals of the challenge environment. If we look at eco-environment, there is a strategy behind all these topics called Europe 2020. It's not new, but it is oriented towards sustainable development, which you also can find in the keywords that are presented here. Now, the big change will be that all the topics, all the projects have to move much further towards the market. And so to say, products, services for users should be available soon after the project's end. It is also, of course, to increase competitiveness in Europe and cost efficiency. So really to create new markets and also to create new workplaces. The second focus, which is really new, is about the raw materials, and there is a huge initiative behind that. It is mainly aiming at better use of Europe's mineral deposits. This doesn't mean that we have in Europe the largest available deposits, but we still have considerable. And this means we are going to go for a revival of mining and engineering. The raw material activities should cover the whole value-added chain, including reuse, recycling, and if possible, substitution for rare materials. It is about to develop innovative, adequate technologies. Now we go back to the structure. That was the CleanTech activities in climate and resources, and I will have a few words now on the competitive industries. This enabling and industrial technologies, there we can expect many CleanTech involved somehow, because they are also addressing the strategy of Europe 2020. And I will go in my last slide now to some funding schemes that are related to the so-called public-private partnerships, the PPPs. These partnerships are not new. They are children of the European Recovery Plan, which was born in 2009. And in the later calls of FP7, they have been proving being great success. For the new public-private partnerships, we have 30% of the budget allocated to them, and they are even more industry-driven than before. We have here a high-level group coming from industry, so it's different from anything that is prepared for the other topics. And we are aiming at the technology readiness level of 5 to 8, which means you can come up with pilot lines, you cannot come up with demonstrators, you cannot come up with prototypes, and this is not only for single SMEs or industry, but long value-added chains. Now, what are these chains? They are focusing on factories of the future, which you know, energy-efficient buildings, also not new, green vehicles, former green cars, and a new activity, sustainable process industry through resource and energy efficiency, called SPIRE. There you can find pulp industry, glass industry, ceramics, cements, and many other energy-intensive industries. In common for these PPPs is that they have multi-annual roadmaps that already have been published for consulting. So what you can do is go for a website surfing, or you are just going to watch our next webinar on 2nd September. Now, my last slide gives you some contact information for me and my colleague Florina Schaffer, who will be happy to answer all your questions. With this, I hand over to Patrick Führer, my colleague, for his news.
Thanks, Mario. Hello, everyone. I'm going to present to you today the ICT part of the Horizon 2020, and more specifically the ICT part dedicated to the CleanTech. So let's first have a look at where ICT is located in this new program, Horizon 2020.
And if you look at this presentation of Horizon 2020, it represents the three main parts of the program. You recognize the three pillars: excellent science, better societies, and competitive industries. And where is ICT here? So, next slide. You see it nearly everywhere. It has its home, especially in the competitive industries. This is where the leadership program in ICT is located, where the most technologies are located, but it has some components in nearly every societal challenge of the Better Societies pillar. And in addition, not to forget, in basic science, in excellence in science, you can also find here bottom-up topics, and this is also very interesting for CleanTech. So, in the next slides, I'm going to present to you in more details where ICT is located for CleanTech in Better Societies first. You heard from my colleague Judith just before on security, and there will be some topics in security, but I don't describe them here. What I'm going to focus here is energy, transport, and climate, resource efficiency, and raw materials. On the efficient energy, we have different action lines that will be very central to the development of ICT technologies in the societal challenges. First, smart cities. I have to mention here that in addition to the PPPs that were mentioned by my colleague Marion just before, there is a new action that is going to be deriving into a new PPP on smart cities. Then you see energy efficient building that was mentioned before, and smart electricity grids as well, and smart metering. These are really the main action lines in ICT in clean energy or efficient energy. On the level of transport, you heard from my colleague Julian different topics that were already IT related. You see the focus here is on smart transport equipment, infrastructures and services. A second focus is on innovative transport management systems, and you realize that safety aspects will be also very important here related to the ICT part. And finally, in climate action and resource efficiency and raw materials, here where do you find ICT, especially for the resource efficiency improvement and increasing these resource efficiencies, and of course in the Earth observation and monitoring. Now, the next part of the ICT is coming from the second pillar, which is actually the industry leadership. And in the ICT leadership, we have actually the core of the ICT activities. And the ICT activities core are mainly focusing on components and systems, on factory of the future that was mentioned already, on the CAT, which is micro nano electronics and photonics, and lots of other activities which I will describe in a minute. First, on components and systems. In components and systems, we have key elements of the environmental and of the energy and transport management that are smart embedded systems and components. And we also have here micro nano biosystems. We also have the Internet of Things that is actually penetrating nearly every area of the CleanTech. And finally also the complex system engineering. On the factory of the future side, what is related to clean technology, especially the digital and virtual enterprise, the product lifecycle management, the innovation for manufacturing enterprises, and SMEs in particular, which is a special action that started already this year in FP7, but that will continue in Horizon 2020. And finally, the CAT, the key enabling technology, micro nanoelectronics and photonics, they will have activities related to CleanTech in design, in advanced processes, and, as mentioned already, in pilot lines to validate technology developments and eco-friendly and innovation business models. Finally, in another part of the industry leadership pillar, you will have many, many activities for innovative SMEs that are more bottom up, and they have currently the name of Fast Track to Innovation. You also heard SME Instruments, and in ICT we also have an activity foreseen that is called Disruptive Innovations. So that's all for where you can find your opportunities for CleanTech in ICT for the moment in Horizon 2020. I want, as my colleagues, to give you my contact details as well as the contact details of my collaborator, Yenori Morales. She's working with Idealist as work package leader. And for that, I thank you for your attention. And now we are going to enter the second phase of this webinar with the different answers to the questions you may have had. And for that, I pass the floor to my colleague, Judith Zbinden, who is actually going to respond to the first questions.
Actually, it's not Judith Zbinden, it's Marion Tober, because the first question was given to me. It was a question about, do we have more information on the CATs, so the key enabling technologies, which are a part of the pillar competitive industries? Yes, we do have some focus areas, and I think Patrick Fuhrer already gave you some details. So there is a CAT on the area microelectronics and photonics. We have one in nanotechnologies, materials, and new productions. So you could say it's the NMP activity, and another one in biotechnologies. Now, how these CATs will be organized, we do not know exactly. We do know that there are the PPPs, so as a horizontal activities across these key enabling technologies. That's for the moment everything that I can tell you. If you would like to surf the internet, there is an information on the website of Industrial Technologies where you can find the roadmaps for the PPPs and of course also what is available as information for Horizon 2020. I think with this, I hope I have answered the question.
It seems that for the moment this was the only question we have. There might have been one that just came in, and I think it is again Marion Tobler who will introduce the question and give a reply. So I pass on the microphone again over to her.
So this is a question about the PPPs. And if I'm right, the question is about the funding of individuals in the PPPs. Is that right? So we have not all the details on how the funding will look like, but most likely the PPPs will have a 70% funding because they are very much market oriented. So the general schedule has a range from 100% to 70% direct cost funding, and those topics that are going really, really close to the market, those topics will have a funding of about 70%. It is aimed, but this is not yet confirmed, that all participants, not only research institutes, but also industry and SME will have the same funding rate. And this is something really, really new and will make your life and our life much easier. I hope this was the answer to your question. And now I hand over to Patrick Fuhrer, who has the next question for you.
Thank you, Marion. There was a question on the budget repartition on the components of better societies. So there was, in a proposal from the European Commission in 2012, a first repartition, and it has to be expected that a new draft or a new version of Horizon 2020 will be communicated to us in the coming months, For the moment, we actually don't know this repartition. We know that has been an agreement at the EU level for the Horizon 2020 package, but we haven't seen yet the final details of this agreement where actually this new repartition will be there. But we can expect a somewhat similar repartition of the funds allocated to every societal challenges in better societies, and the split of the 6, you remember there was one societal challenge that has been split in 2, and there will be a new repartition between these 2 new societal challenges for Horizon 2020. The budget in total, that's a new question for Horizon 2020 decision. What we can tell you is that the budget in discussion at the EU level was around 71 billion euros. We actually, for the same reasons as before, we don't actually know the final deal. We know that there was an agreement on budget, but we don't know if the final deal is at exactly this level or higher or lower. It will be around that figure, most likely. But so for the moment, as we don't have the official documents, we cannot let you know this figure.
I have the next question that was asked. It is about SME instruments, and we have the information about the budget that 20% in the societal challenges will be related to SME, to this SME instrument or to the SME topic area, and 5% will be bottom-up topics. Okay, there is a question about a webinar on space. Actually, the activity space is also included in the competitive industry. We did not plan to have a webinar on space individually, but it will be covered in our launch event in January 2040. And we also will announce via our newsletter when we will have an info day in Switzerland. I can already tell you that there will be an info day from the Commission around 10th of December this year, either in Brussels or Toulouse, that is to discuss. So that was the question about space. I enlarged it a little bit. Do we have another question? Well, you're very busy, everybody. So I'm just waiting for the next question. Okay. So the first calls we are expecting. I can hand over to Judith. So I guess that will be the last question for this webinar.
There was a general question on first calls, whether we already know whether calls will be launched in December. As far as I know, the ERC, the European Research Council, is the only program which has sort of indicated a tentative call schedule, and they hope to be able to have the first call for starting grants launching in December. As far as I know, from the societal challenges, industrial leadership pillar, and the rest of the societal challenge and the rest of the competitive industries, we only really have rumors on first calls. Calls might be launched already in December, but it's really not more than a rumor. As soon as we have a little bit more established information, we will spread it through our established channel, in our newsletter, through our e-alerts, etc. But it's really too early now to make any, to give any information on that. I think this was the last question we received through our chat. You have the contact details at the end of each presentation, and we all would be very happy to answer your questions bilaterally at any point in time. Now, this was the third one in our series of 5 Horizon 2020 webinars. Our next webinar will treat mainly the industrial pillar, the industrial leadership pillar, and will take place on the 2nd of September. There is still a few places left in case you haven't registered yet. With that, we would like to thank you very much for participating in our webinar, and we wish you a nice afternoon. Goodbye.